So we all know by now Vashtorr is like the latest big deal in the 40k community. He's going to be making his big debut in the coming Arcs of Omen series that's dropping soon, which is going to include a lot of big stuff, but more than anything, people are hyped for Vashtorr, and I can't blame them. I mean, look at this shit. This model fucks severely. I want one. A bit of background before I start pissing people off here. The deal with Vashtorr is that he's a greater demon of Chaos Undivided like Be'lakor, but he's got designs on becoming a minor Chaos God like Malice, which I think would be absolutely awesome. His whole shtick is that he's a Forge Master of the Forge of Souls in the Warp, which is one of those non-aligned warp locations, kind of like the Well of Eternity, that we know exists but don't really hear much about. What he does in the Forge is to serve as sort of an arms dealer for the Great Game between the Chaos Powers, by fabricating new things for them to throw in the meat grinder, like demon engines or defilers and all those sort of things. The things that have really cool models on the tabletop for when you're playing Chaos Space Marines, those sort of things. What spawned his creation in the Warp is the desire of mortals for things like innovation and experimentation. Like, it states that the creation of Primaris Marines, the waking of Necrons, and even the Cursed Founding all the way back when, have all helped to sort of empower and create him in the Warp, to the point where he can reasonably set his eyes on ascending to the realm of minor godhood. We really first meet Vashtorr in this trailer from Warhammer Community, where he greets Abaddon because Abaddon wants to strike up a deal with him. He'll make the Arcs of Omen, and Abaddon will exchange help him achieve godhood, and between you and me, I don't expect Abby to follow up on his end of the bargain at all. Those two are absolutely going to come to blows at some point in my opinion, and a quick aside, but we do hear his voice in the trailer, and he sounds a lot like this old woman I know with a tracheotomy who comes into my family convenience store wielding a fistful of lottery tickets every other week like they're a stack of royal decrees, and we're being called up to fucking war to defend the country or something. I mean, maybe the gambling has helped her kick the smoking, so, you know, hey, you go, queen. Now, as hyped as I am about the Arcs of Omen, the real reason I made this video, and the real meat and potatoes of it, is the whole god angle of the game Vash is playing here. Because what does a god need more than anything? Followers. Like, we hear nothing of Malice, the minor god of anarchy and death, until it has its own Space Marine Legion following it, the Sons of Malice, who have a fucking killer aesthetic, by the way. To that end, Vash is gonna need followers, and given what his flavor is, 3 groups come to mind. The first 2 being the Dark Mechanicum and the Iron Warriors. The third one I'll get to in a bit because it is kind of a stretch, but if you've seen the thumbnail, you'll know what I'm gonna get to. The Dark Mechanicum one is the one I want to talk about first, because this is a really big one. See, it's pretty obvious from like minute 1 of Vashtorr's reveal, because they value innovation a lot more than the regular Adeptus Mechanicus ever did, and that's a big part of their character. They design radical new ships like the Planet Killer that Abaddon used during the Gothic War, and different demon engines and all that. They've generally been in the backseat for way too long in terms of the lore, with a few bit parts in a few books here and there after the heresy, like Talon of Horus and Black Legion by Aaron Dembski Bowden, but those are 2 parts of the same series. But aside from that, there are scant few mentions of like true Dark Mechanicum that aren't just heretics outside of the heresy. Like, we do have mentions of them in some of the books like The First Wall and The Lost and the Damned, but aside from that, they just don't show up or play much of a role. Honestly, to me it's a real shame because Mechanicus unit and vehicle models are such fan favorites, and seeing dark reflections of that, especially with 10,000 years of deviation and warp taint, would be absolutely awesome. It would also make for an amazing return of an old Heresy-era character, Kelbor Hal, the original leader of the Dark Mechanicum. Because at this time, remember this video is being recorded before the Death and the End, we have no idea what his fate was after the Siege of Terra. One thing to remember is that the Dark Mechanicum do not view the Emperor as the Omnissiah, they view him as a fraud. And spiritually, I think that's a role Vashtorr could fill very easily for them. And just think about it, Kelbor Hal and Vashtorr would make awesome warlord units on the table. One group I haven't seen talked about, but that I also think could fall in with Vashtorr would be the Iron Warriors. Now, that might not seem obvious on the face of it, because a big thing with them is that they don't give a shit about the ruinous powers and are fiercely independent by nature. And honestly, I love that about them. It's why they're my favorite Traitor Legion next to the Alpha Legion. But the fact that no other Legion even comes close to having the same number of Warsmiths as they do should account for something. I feel like at least some might begin to fall in with Vashtorr, something that Perturabo would not fucking like. which in my mind would be an awesome way to set up his return to the setting in his Demon Prince form, since we haven't properly seen it yet. The third group I want to talk about that Vash might find cronies in is one that I feel like is the least likely narratively speaking, but also has the coolest room to speculate, and that would be the Votann. Please don't hurt me, I can explain. The kin within the Leagues of Votann are a really stubborn society because, let's face it, they're fucking dwarves, but they aren't nearly as opposed to invention as Imperials, and they've been slowly innovating their old Dark Age of technology patterns over the years in the way Imperials never would. That would likely help feed Vashtorr, but I don't think that's nearly reason enough to side with him. I do think, though, it at the very least makes them susceptible to his words, not on an individual basis, but on a clan-by-clan basis, because the Leagues of Votann society are divided into different groups, and all the groups are centered around a giant AI supercomputer called a Votann, hence where the faction gets its name. But over the millennia, they've severely been slowing down and even developing personalities of their own, and when something develops a personality in Warhammer, we know for sure its days are numbered. I foresee Vashtorr presenting himself as a god who can commune with and save the Votann computers, thereby causing a rift between the clans that ally with him and those who oppose. This is sort of corroborated by the fact that STCs from the Dark Age of technology have been found to be infected with chaos, and many people theorize that chaos influence is what caused the AIs to revolt against humanity back during the Cybernetic Revolt. Also, as an aside, I know the kin of the clans aren't psychically potent, but they aren't like Tau level, and they do have some sort of pseudo-psychers, who funnily enough, use these ancestral warding staffs to channel psychic energies and make them comparable to human psychers. So even their psychic abilities require innovation, which I think plays further into that. Another reason I think this is because every species in 40k has internal divisions, barring the Tyranids, but honestly they're more a force of nature than anything else. The best example I can think of this is the Tau, who have gone from being this unified front to having a massive, bitter rift in their population with the Farside enclaves. Personally, I think the Leagues will be no different in some form or another, because honestly, it just makes more narrative possibilities, and they probably won't be straight up Chaos kin, but I do think there will be some potential there. All in all, I think there's a lot of possibilities for where Vashtorr's story could go, as long as he doesn't end up crushed by Abaddon. Something which I think is a very real possibility, and there's a lot of groups who could narratively benefit from being by his side when he tries to ascend to godhood. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Was I on point with any of my theories, especially the Votann one? I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments. Reading your guys' takes is always one of my favorite things about these videos. Like and subscribe, it really means a lot to me as I start on WarTube, and I'll see you in the next video.